Graduated from high school in 1944, and I was 17 years old, and the draft called me up and says you had to go into the service. So I was drafted, and they picked me up. Okay, I remember very clearly going to the Norwood. I lived in Norwood, Ohio at the time, and they had a train station there, and the train came up, and they took me over to the train station to get on the train to go to the Great Lakes outside of Chicago, where the Navy trained the people. And they sent me to Ames, Iowa, to the engineering school in Ames, Iowa, electrical engineering school in Ames, Iowa, where they were training Navy men who want to be electrician mates in the Navy. And so I was there for about somewhere around 4 to 6 months, somewhere around, I'm not sure exactly everything else. But it was great duty, because they had a school where they taught cooking and everything else, and so they had a lot of girls there teaching you, making all kind of meals and everything for you, you know. We really got treated really wonderful and stuff like that. So I was one of 150 recruits, and they trained us for about about 1 or 2 months, stuff like that. And then they gave you a bunch of tests. They checked your health and checked you with tests and everything else. And then at the end of the time, out of 150, they picked five people to go to school, and I was one of them, the electrician mates. So then from there, I was assigned to go to Europe. But the war in Europe came to an end. So they changed my assignment and sent me back to the Pacific. And there I was there, and a guy from the Los Angeles football team took a liking to me. And he made me his assistant. And he kept me there for a long time. We got along very well. And then one day he came up and told me, he says, Vic, he says, I can't hold you any longer. You have to go overseas. So they shipped me from the San Francisco to the Golden Gate Bridge, out to the Pacific, to Leyte Gulf, to wait for the invasion of Japan. And that's where I sat when they dropped the bomb, and everybody went wild. Because the second bomb, they went double wild, and they had big parties. And the reason for it, very clearly, that if we had gone into the invasion of Japan, a lot of people would have been killed. And maybe I would never have been here either. Because they were ferocious fighters, the Japanese, and they didn't surrender. But anyway, the war came to an end, and then I was reassigned out of Leyte Gulf into a Peleliu Island to take over for people that were being discharged, because I was over there for a period of I had to be in there for about 2 years, two and a half years. I forget the exact time. So I didn't serve my time, so I served on the island of Peleliu as an electrician mate and stuff like that. Then at the end of that period, I was sent back home.
Okay, this is a story from my childhood when I was about 4 in 1942 in a semi-rural area in a small town called Clementon, New Jersey. My dad was a volunteer for the air raids on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock. He had to leave a little early and stand by his large barrel filled with sand in case there was an air raid. We had a floor model radio, and I stood in front of the floor model radio, which was about a little bit taller than I, but I could reach the face of the radio, the dial, and my parents told my brother and I at that time about what they had to do. And so they emphasized how dark it had to be so that no lights could be seen from the air. But at 8 o'clock, the sirens would go off. And the sirens went off at the same time as a mother for the program that we listened to religiously on Thursday nights would call Henry Aldridge. And then Henry would answer, "Coming, Mother." But I loved that program. But I stood for the half hour that the program was on with my arms covering the dial of the radio. And I was very frightened. But I was so naive, and my mother never corrected me. She just allowed me to do that.
One day we were in Italy, and we all sat down and eating gnocchi at this table, right? And Marmy said, well, you know, guys, you know, the devil's a very bad person. I was scared, personally, because the devil sounds like a really crazy person, right? And then she said, but also, the devil shows up anyway, right? And then Marmy was like, there can be the devil's everywhere. And I was scared. She's like, you could turn your head to the right, and the devil's there. Turn your head to the left, and the devil's there. So I spent the next 2 beautifully hot weeks in Italy, running around in little circles, like a little scared boy.
Wrap it up.
And because Marmy likes scaring little boys into thinking that the devil is everywhere at the same time. There, done.